Okay, Mr. Caridi, I think we got this. Um, we'll have some more kids coming in uh, kind of slowly, but we appreciate you doing this, especially considering we know you have a Baylor game tonight. But we were hoping maybe you could talk about your career and then take some questions from students, if that works. You're muted right now, Mr. Caridi. Okay. On my screen, it's up at the top. The
Hey,
mic.
hey, Sam.
There you go.
My
Yeah.
bad. My bad. I had 5 windows. I said that I had 5 windows open. My bad. I said we've got one problem, and the problem is you have to stop calling me Mr. Caridi. It's got to be Tony the rest of the way. I'm assuming you guys hear me all right now. You do. Okay. Sounds good. You're frozen on my end, but I'm more than happy to let it roll. It's my pleasure, guys and girls, an honor to be with you guys on this class. I think that your instructor here, Sam, has done a fantastic job. I was surprised to hear the folks that you had already visit with you this season in Dean and also in Mike Golick. And that kind of level of, folks that you've had talk with you is really, really good stuff. And certainly beyond what a normal high school class would be entitled to. So I think that's great. And I'm glad that you guys are doing this. I know that this has been an amazing time in everyone's life. Obviously, it blows my mind that we're here at 1 year now going through COVID. It was a year ago, next week really, that we were in Kansas City for the Big 12 Conference basketball tournament when we heard the word that everything was going to shut down as far as basketball. And never in our wildest dreams did we ever think that a year later this would still be going on. And while we are starting to see signs of improvement, obviously things are still very much different. There's going to be a very limited number of folks at the Big 12 tournament this year. Here this afternoon in Morgantown, we've got an attendance which has been capped at 2,700. So it's a weird year, and I think especially for all students in all age groups. You guys, unfortunately, have been given the short end of the stick here, and that's just the reality of it. And there's no way that you'll be able to get that back. You know, in college athletics, eligibility has been frozen. And so, guys that are freshmen, girls that are freshmen this year, they're going to be freshmen again next year. But in the real world, time hasn't stopped. If you're a junior, you're going to be a senior. If you're a senior, you're gone. And so I really have great thoughts for you guys that you guys have been, put into a different deal that no one else has ever experienced. But I do think there's a plus side to that. I think that what we've all gone through will be something that you'll never have to deal with again. And I think that you can always look back at this point in your life and say, if I was able to get through this, I can deal with anything. And so I think from an encouragement standpoint, you guys have come out of this. The plus is you're going to be rock solid, strong, saying, I dealt with that. Other obstacles I can get through. Sam had asked me to kind of give you a little bit of a background story on me. I grew up and was raised just outside of a place out of Buffalo, New York, in a place called Lockport, New York, which is one of the cities on the Erie Barge Canal. I am the son of an Italian immigrant dad who came to the United States very late. He was 32 years old. It was in the late 1950s. Most of the immigration came in the early 1900s. And my mom's parents both came from Italy, so I'm 100% Italian. My dad owned a grocery store, which he ran with our family for 52 years. And one of the things that he would always tell me is, I'm not in this business for you to take this over. I'm in this business so you can do whatever it is that you want. For whatever reason, I was enthralled, excited, encouraged by sports growing up. although he wasn't, because that store was open from 9 in the morning until 10 at night. It wasn't that he didn't like sports, that he was working constantly. And we were all there with him. But I fell in love with sports, played sports. And as I got a little bit older, kind of, about ninth or 10th grade or so, started to take a liking to the radio and the broadcasting, and was just kind of really infatuated by that. I made my first college choice of going to a school in the State University of New York system. It's called SUNY, State University of New York at Geneseo, which is between Rochester and Buffalo. I spent 2 years there. But after my first year, my freshman summer of school, I got an internship at a television station in Buffalo, and I got a really good idea there what the real world was like in broadcasting. And it was completely different from what I was seeing at that school. So I made the decision to transfer to Syracuse University, which has had a great tradition and reputation through the years of turning out broadcasters. And so I spent my sophomore year at Geneseo, basically just taking my core classes, transferred to Syracuse for my junior and senior year. And when I was there, really had a great environment and a great group of people around me, guys that have gone on and had great success in broadcasting. And so I was put into this bubble, so to speak, of all of these guys that were aspiring to do the same thing that I wanted to do. And as a result of that, when you're associated with that, it makes you better, it makes you compete, and it gets you a good feel. And some of the guys that, that I was with, include Sean McDonough, who you may see. He does Big Monday basketball. He does primetime college football. He's done the World Series. He's done Monday Night Football. Dan Horde's the voice of the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cincinnati Bearcats. Jim Jackson's the voice of the Philadelphia Flyers. Craig Minervini does the Florida Panthers. Rich Cimini's the ESPN voice for the New York Jets. So all of these guys, and, we were all together at that time. Guys and girls were all together at that time, and we've gone on, through the years. So I graduate from Syracuse, and like everybody else, you're looking for your first job. I got a phone call a few weeks after I graduated. I had taken a job doing overnight news at a radio station in Syracuse. And that's not what I wanted to do, but I knew that I needed to be on the air to get experience. And so I think lesson number one is, if what you want to do is here, you don't necessarily get there instantly, but you have to start walking down that road. And in my case, the road was just get on the air, whether it was news, sports, or whatever. So I'm doing overnight news. I get a phone call one Saturday morning from a guy in Morgantown, West Virginia. And he identified himself as Hoppy Kercheval. And I'd never heard of anyone named Hoppy. And so he said, I've got a news job down here doing radio news. At the time, I thought I had a job in sports in York, Pennsylvania coming. And so I kind of blew him off. And I said, well, I'm not a news guy. I'm a sports guy. And I appreciate it, but I'm going to get this job in York. Within a matter of like 4 or 5 days, the York thing doesn't happen. And so I call back Hoppy and I say, I really am a news guy, because I had no other option. So he said, well, we'll see. Come on down here. So I drove from Syracuse to Morgantown, and it was the first time I'd ever come to West Virginia. And it was kind of wild in that it was a July day, a Sunday I got here. And back then, Morgantown was less than bustling in 1984 in July, because there wasn't the summer school that's going on now. And so it was just quiet. So I pulled off the exit, the Saberton exit. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar, but I thought, like, when I came down the stretch in Saberton, I thought that was like the main drag. And I went like, whoa, I'm not staying here. And so I looked around. Finally, I go down High Street, Morgantown. Okay, a little bit better, but it was still, I'm not sure. The next day I have the interview, and I was overwhelmed by the facility and the gear, the equipment that the station had. And this was for WAJR radio. And I said, okay, this might be a good start, thinking all along that it would be for like 6 months. 6 months, because in broadcasting, you move on. Well, if you guys do the math, right, that was 84. So here we go, 37 years later. And the short side of that is that there were always opportunities to grow and to stay, and reasons to grow, reasons to stay. The company that I worked for gave me great flexibility. So after a very short while of just doing news only, I started to do radio sports, and I started to get involved with the Mountaineers Sports Network, doing some reporting, doing some color analyst stuff for football, and it just started to grow. And at that time, the Metro News Radio Network was created. Talked about it in 1985, year after I got here. It opened up in 1986. I became the sports director. And the voice of the Mountaineers, Jack Fleming, was the broadcaster at that time. And that really wasn't my desire or my goal to do that. I just wanted to be a play-by-play guy somewhere. So the folks that I worked for here gave me the opportunity to what we call freelance. And I would leave and I would go do other games every football weekend and also basketball games. So I just through connections, I got involved doing the Westwood One College Football Game of the Week, which was national radio. Every week I'd have these awesome games. And it was really good because I'd come back to Morgantown, work during the week, Fridays leave, Saturday do a game somewhere, come back Sunday and do the whole thing over. That continues through like the 90s. And I'm still doing Mountaineers Sports Network stuff on TV, basketball games. I started doing the Atlantic 10 Conferences Game of the Week. So I had this great flexibility. 1996, Jack Fleming, the voice of the Mountaineers, becomes ill, football season opener. I fill in the rest of the year on football and then do all of the basketball on the road that year. And in 1997, I take over full-time doing the WVU broadcast, both football, basketball, and all the other stuff that comes along with that. In addition, I've never left my job at West Virginia Radio Corporation, which at that time when I first started was just two radio stations, WAJR, WVAQ. But through the years, the company continued to grow. Rules changed, which allowed companies to own more than two radio stations. That was during the Ronald Reagan administration. They deregulated radio, and this company began to buy up other radio stations to the tune of now over 30 stations that the company owns. The Metro News Network is, has over 60 affiliates across the state. And I've hosted a talk show on the network since 1986, the Sports Line, which airs at 6 o'clock each night. So that's kind of a relatively quick overview of 37 fast years. And I know you guys have a bunch of questions, and I'd be delighted to answer whatever y'all have.
All right. Thank you for that. So just so you're aware, it says there's 23 people, but we got about 45, 50 people here, just not everyone logged in. So some people may just ask me to ask you a question. Sure. And then some may on their iPad unlock themselves. So I'm just going to kind of call on people. And if you're willing to answer, they've got all kinds of questions for you.
Absolutely. Hey, Sam, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm returning the favor, or you did that earlier. A lot of kids wondered, do you have one distinct memory in football or basketball that just really stands out for you, a favorite memory of WVU athletics?
I don't have one specific memory, but I probably have a handful of memories. Firstly, we've been incredibly fortunate at WVU to have really great success. This goes all the way back to 1980 when Don Nealon was hired as the head football coach. And you probably have heard the name, and he coached West Virginia up until the early 2000s. He provided some unbelievable memories, including playing for a national championship in 1988 with a quarterback named Major Harris. Rich Rodriguez then came in, and he took the program on a rocket shot as well. So those games through the years, for example, my first year here in 1984, West Virginia had not beaten Penn State since the 1950s. And my first year here, West Virginia beats Penn State. 1984, the same year, Doug Flutie from Boston College wins the Heisman Trophy West Virginia gave BC its only loss of the season in an unbelievable night game in Morgantown. You go on to the Rich Rodriguez era, and you talk about winning a Sugar Bowl in Atlanta, Georgia. It had been moved because of the hurricane that year in New Orleans, and West Virginia beats basically Georgia in its home territory in the Sugar Bowl. You go to the Fiesta Bowl, where West Virginia beats Oklahoma after Coach Rod had left. You jump into the Dana Holgerson era, and you think about the victory West Virginia had in the Orange Bowl over Clemson, where they put up 70 on the board. You know, those are just a few of the all-time greats. The one thing, and I'll make this point to you guys, as you well know, our state has 1.8 million people in it. West Virginia University sports is the most successful college sports program in the country, which has such a small population. No other school has had the success in both football and basketball as WVU does. WVU all time in the history of sport is in the top 25 in victories in both basketball and football. That's extremely hard to do. You see it at very, very few schools. Most schools, maybe they're good in one, not so good in another, but West Virginia's been able to do it in both at such a small population, which means that for the most part, we've got to go out of the state and recruit folks to leave their home state to come here. So we've really had an unbelievable run of success, and you can trace it all the way back to the 1980s. And basketball obviously is the same kind of a deal. I can get into games there as well. Long answer to your short question is that there isn't one that stands out, but there are a handful of really special games.
What was it like winning Sports Broadcaster of the Year?
It's nice. It's nice. I guess it's, to me, when you win honors or awards, it always means more when the folks that are doing the voting are the ones that are in the same business that you're in. And so that when you have other broadcasters voting for you, that to me means a great deal. And to be quite honest with you, when we have competitions and things like that, and the voters are from outside of the area and don't have any idea as to who you are, but they just vote on the work that they hear or see to win those kinds of awards, that's very, very special.
All right, one of my students wants to know what you think of Javon Carter and kind of his prospects going on in the NBA.
I think Javon is a wonderful story that whether you play the game of basketball or not, we can all learn from his story. So his story is that he was extremely under recruited coming out of high school, and yet had this dream that he was going to play in the NBA. And some of you may know the story. Really, his best offer came from Valparaiso when he was coming out of high school. He also had an Ivy League offer. I believe it was Dartmouth. But other than that, there were no Power 5 schools. But he had it in his head that he was going to play pro basketball. And so West Virginia sees him in the recruiting process and loved his tenacity and loved his hustle. So he took a skill set that he had, which is defense, and he put it on display when the Mountaineers staff was watching him at an AAU tournament in Florida. And Hugs, immediately took to that and loved the way that he pressured the ball. So once he gets here, here's what I'm going to walk you guys through. There are about 3 different types of, and this is generalization, but there's 3 different types of athletes once they get here. There are those that get here and they're happy to be here and they like playing their sport. There are those who are happy to be here and they love to play their sport. And then there's this third, which is really rare to find. They're happy to be here and they live to play their sport. And what happens is those that live to do whatever it is that they choose to do have the highest level of success. That's so far away from just basketball. If you wanted to become the best welder and you just like it, you'll be okay. If you love it, you'll probably be above average. But if you just say, I'm going to be the greatest and live it, you oftentimes do become that in whatever profession, accounting, law, medicine, whatever it was, whatever it is. So Javon is that classic example of the person that lived it. And when the season was over, he never stopped. He just looked at, okay, what do I need to do better? So he's the end result of that, becomes the National Defensive Player of the Year, makes his mark for defense. Memphis Grizzlies obviously draft him, and he stays there for a bit, then goes to Phoenix. So his biggest accomplishment is what you try to do once you get into the league. Number one, it's hard to get into the league. Number two, if you can get a second contract, that's where you make money. And he got his second contract and he's making money. So the application to all of us is that if you really want to do something at an optimum level in life, I think personally, you've got to live it. And to me, it's got to be almost an almost borderline obsessive compulsive to do it. And that personally is what I had in broadcasting. Man, I would not let it get away. I was just on it. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a play-by-play person. And as anything that I could take in, learn, watch what the others that are doing that I consider to be really, really good, I'm just kind of constantly looking at it and trying to get better to do that. That's the life lesson I think that Javon teaches us.
This is kind of building off of that. Do you see anybody on this year's team flourishing, making it to the NBA?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's going to be some guys. Deuce, obviously. Deuce McBride has got the same opportunity that Javon had. Deuce is much, much farther ahead offensively than Javon was at this point. If you take a look at the statistics between those two players, Deuce just played his 50, I think today is maybe 52, 53, 54th game. But we matched his statistics with Javon's statistics at the 50 game mark. And in like all but one category, Deuce is ahead of him. Field goal percentage, rebound, steals, assists, turnover ratio, the whole deal. And Deuce lives it. Deuce wants to be a pro. And he's going to be a pro. He's going to make money. The question is, does he instantly go into the NBA? Does he come back next year? Does he put his name into the draft after this year? But Deuce, obviously, Derek Culver is going to get an opportunity. He put some numbers up that are massive. He'll be first team all conference when that announcement's made next week. But I think from the perspective of living it, Deuce is the number one guy right now on that Mountaineer team that lives it.
Who do you think is the youngest team in the? No. Who do you think is the um most underrated team in the NFL right now?
Most underrated team in the NFL?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sam, it was National Football League?
Yeah, NFL.
NFL. Whew. Most underrated team in the NFL. It's a good question. Let me give you a weird answer to it. A team not too far from you guys. Now, if I were to say to you the Cleveland Browns, you're going to go, wait a second. Cleveland Browns got a ton of publicity and a ton of attention this past season. Answer to that is yes. But one season does not make it real. Was that a one season aberration, or have the Browns, after all these years of futility, finally turned the corner, and can they become a consistent, placeholder and a contender? So that's going to be the question. So were they last year's shiny little toy that everyone kind of liked and said, isn't that cute? Or are they real? Having watched Baker Mayfield play at Oklahoma and in college, I mean, he's an absolute baller. He's only going to get better. I think his light obviously has turned on. So I'm going to give you a weird answer, even though you'll say they got a ton of publicity, but it might be the Browns.
That's his favorite team. So you picked the right one.
Oh, there you
That's
go.
by far his favorite team. Yeah. This was a question we asked Mike Golick. How has media changed from when you first started to today?
It has done an absolute 180. You got to remember when we started here, we had zero internet, and the internet and technology has completely changed sports. What's happened is this: in the quote unquote old days, there was a message sender that would deliver information, and the person that took that information in would read, listen, watch that information, and had absolutely no way to provide feedback to that messaging. Okay. So, what happens with the advent of the internet? You no longer have to be a sports writer, a sports broadcaster, a TV anchor to become your own content publisher, your own channel, so to speak. So the old days, it was a one person exchange to a bunch of listeners. Now, anyone with a computer, and for that matter, anyone with a cell phone, you can record yourself and push it out on whatever platform you want to push it out on. You can write and push it out. You can get reaction, real time reaction, right? You could go on Twitter, get instantaneous reaction. You go to Clubhouse, get instantaneous reaction. That's what's changed. It's the ability to have in real time back and forth. So it could not have changed more than it has. I don't necessarily know, like anything else, that it all has been good. I think we've lost some stuff in regard to quality back and forth, but that's how it has changed. It's unbelievable change.
How do you feel about Oscar Sheboy transferring to Kentucky?
I was disappointed by it. I was surprised by it, as I think a lot of people within the program were, and obviously the fan base was. He's a delightful young kid and obviously has some unbelievable athleticism. And I never thought, that after he left that we would be able to be where we are right now. I mean, here it is, the second day of March. West Virginia is 6 in the country, potentially a 2 seed, and rolling. Came off of a 6-1 February. So there's a bunch of pieces to that. We talked about what media has changed and how media has changed. Well, personnel in college sports has changed as well, and it's getting ready to take a massive change. The days of student athletes coming to a school, spending their 4 or 5 years if they redshirt, I think those days are gone. I think, unfortunately, that we all live in an instant gratification world. And if things don't go our way, the easiest thing to do is to say, I'm out. However, I think it's in those difficult times that we experience where we learn the most about ourselves and specifically what it is that we're doing. The folks that provide guidance and counsel to Oscar thought that he would be better served going somewhere else. And that's why I think the decision and the move was made. I also think that it was, as we've all seen, playing both Oscar and Derek together, it just it just never worked. You can say what you want. There wasn't enough space in the paint. There wasn't whatever. It never worked extremely well, or as well as we thought it was going to. I think Derek came in to start this season, and he was balling right from the very beginning. I think Oscar struggled, even though he was averaging like a 8 and 7 or something like that. I think he was disappointed that he had not blossomed. And so you can get a lot of back and forth as to why that wasn't happening. And so I think the folks that advised him said you could be better suited somewhere else. Obviously, that's going to be Kentucky. I think the unintended consequence to it all is that West Virginia as a team got better and is better. And that to me is the biggest surprise of the whole thing.
Do you like announcing for football or basketball more, or do you have a preference?
That's a good question. I get asked that a lot. And I tell you what, Caitlin, they're so different that I don't have a preference. They're really truly different. While, I'll give it to you real quick. Basketball, there's 10 people in front of you, and in non-COVID times, they're like 3 feet away from me, and they're going back up and down the floor, and it's a bang, 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 bang game, quickly moving. Football is entirely different. There's 22 people on the floor, on the field, with helmets on. You can't see their faces, and they're running into each other on every snap, and you're way up in the air. So a basketball broadcast is basically just you, and you're going on it, and you're doing it because it goes so fast. Whereas in football, I've got a spotter next to me, I've got a statistician in my ear, I've got a color analyst, I've got a producer, a bunch of moving pieces. So my my answer, not to sound like a politician, is I truly love both of them for different reasons, and whatever's in season is good with me.
I'm gonna ask a question off of that one. How do you, in general, prepare? But how do you prepare differently for basketball and football broadcast?
Yeah, so football, as I said, because there's so many moving pieces to it, I in college started to use a memorization technique to memorize numbers of players. And what I'll do is I'll start on Monday of game week. I'll get the opposing team, and I will get anyone on that opposing team that has a chance to touch the ball in the game on Saturday. And I will memorize their name and their number in a pretty wild system. And that's what I do. So every day, every morning when I'm out walking my dog, Charles Barkley, I memorize names, and then later in the week, I'll watch tape. I'll watch coaches tape and see those folks that I've been memorizing so I can see what they look like. Who's long, who's tall, who's got their hair coming out of the back of their helmet, who I just try to pick up pieces so that I instantly know who they are. Conversely, and there's a whole process that I go through. We have spotting boards and spotting charts that I use for football, and I build those during the course of the week so that I've got bio notes on every player. Basketball, I never even look at their numbers, believe it or not. So this afternoon, for example, we're playing Baylor, and I will just look at them while they're warming up. I've watched them on TV. I know who they are. And so I know what Jared Butler looks like. I know what Davion Mitchell looks like. I know what Massimo Teague looks like. I know what Flo Thamba looks like from Baylor. And I just put their face and I just know who they are. I do the same thing as far as creating a bio note, 4 bio notes for every single player in front of me. But I just look down on the floor because, again, as I went back to Caitlin's question initially, was I can see their faces. So there's a ton of preparation, and you're only as good as your preparation, because every game, even though some people might say that don't fully appreciate it, will say, it's the same thing. It's just a game, da, 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 da. Every game's got a different storyline to it, and you've got to be ready to know the background so that when it happens and when something takes place, what the significance of it is. So that's really, like anything else, the real work is before the game ever starts. The actual broadcast is not the hard part. The real work, if you're doing it right, is the preparation, like taking a test, right? You hope that you prepare so well for a test that when you get to the test, that's the easy part. Same kind of a thing in a broadcast. You do all your work early on, and then when the thing happens, you've got it all, and you're not looking around for information.
So being a native of New York, had you not won the coin toss to be offered the job initially at Morgantown, where do you think that may have led you and changed your career?
That is an unbelievable question. I have no idea. And I've thought about, how our lives are impacted by like a decision, right? And you guys are always told, I'm sure, make the right decision, make proper decisions, because one decision can impact you, right, forever. Unintended consequences. You did this, and while you might be able to fix it, there may be a consequence that goes along with that. And in my case, I've just been unbelievably blessed, fortunate that the call and the decision that I made to come here. But I've got absolutely zero idea, Kendall, where or what I would have done had I not come down to West Virginia.
Hold on one second. Building off that, this was a question that I thought was really good. A couple different people had. Did it take you a little while to transition? You're a Syracuse grad. Syracuse and WVU used to play each other every year. Of your allegiance in any way whenever you came to WVU?
That's a good question. I get asked that a lot. And short answer to that would be, first couple years, obviously, I still knew the folks at Syracuse, and I knew some of the players at Syracuse. So that was kind of different. But the difference is this. So I grew up outside of Buffalo. Syracuse was 3 hours away. So kind of think about like the same distance from Morgantown to Martinsburg. And because Syracuse is a private school and not a state school, the relationship that the school has with the people in the state is absolutely unlike the association that a state university like WVU has with its people, right? So WVU has people that have graduated from all 55 counties in West Virginia. Syracuse, I had no affiliation with Syracuse whatsoever growing up. I was a Buffalo Sabres, Buffalo Bills, and back then we had an NBA team, the Buffalo Braves. That's who I grew up. So I didn't grow up a Syracuse fan, and I was only there for 2 years. And so, no, in short time, once I got here, no, I really had no extra affinity. I mean, I wouldn't have what I have without having gone to Syracuse's broadcast school, the Newhouse School of Communications. I'm unbelievably proud of that. But as far as athletics go, no. And to be quite honest with you, not a huge fan. And my wife, a lot of times when I'm rooting against Syracuse back in our days when we were playing in the Big East, or I'll give you, I hope they lose, she'll go, I don't understand that. I just go like, well, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. And that's kind of how that whole thing has evolved.
All right, this is a specific question about tonight against Baylor. Of how do you think we'll fare? What kind of defense do you think Coach Huggins will run against their athleticism?
Really good question, because I have no idea yet where Baylor is in this return from COVID. As you guys know, if you follow it, they went 18 days without playing. This will be their third game back in 8 days. First game back last week, they're down 17 at home to Iowa State and barely win that game. Saturday, they get beat double figures at Kansas. And now the question becomes, okay, now it's their third game today. Are they back up to where they were, or will they struggle again as a result of just not having played? I don't know. They flew directly from Kansas to Morgantown. They got here on Sunday, so they've been working out here. That's the biggest question. I think they're downright scary. I mean, before COVID, they were unbelievable. They had the largest margin of victory of any team in the Big 12. They were winning conference games by an average of 14 points, which is unheard of. They're number one in the league, still scoring offense and scoring defense. So when they're on, yeah, then they're a legitimate national championship contender. But where are they with that? As you guys know, if you follow it, last March 7th, they were here, and West Virginia beat them by double figures. The key in that game was rebounding, and we pretty much doubled them up at the foul line, going to the foul line. So tonight, it comes down to, can Derek get to the foul line? Can West Virginia make free throws? And will they continue to struggle their shooting from three? They really struggled on Saturday at Kansas, only made 6 threes. They shot well below their percentage. So great matchup. What will West Virginia do defensively? They'll try to guard a man. they will drop back into what they've been toying around with here recently, that kind of point drop that has variations in its slides that kind of just becomes this mumbo jumbo amoeba defense where they trap out of it. Sometimes they don't trap out of it other times. I mean, like Hugs will say, he's not exactly sure how teams are going to play against his defense because he's not really sure what his defense is doing. And so they're really good, man. I mean, when you take Butler, Teague, Mitchell, and their bigs, they got NBA guys running around on the floor. They play extremely well. They pass extremely well. If you could get a W here this afternoon, that would be huge. The line is 4, so they're expecting a tight game.
This is a personal question. Your kind of catchphrase is "It's a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be." Was that something that was planned, or did you just say that one time and it kind of stuck?
Both. So there is a buddy of mine who's from Morgantown, who's now the head coach at Drexel University in Philly, and grew up here, played at Morgantown High, played college basketball at Ithaca College. And he once told me a story about when they had a game, they won a game, come from behind, and in the locker room after the game, Ithaca's nickname is the Bombers. And so his coach said at the end of the game, "All right, guys, they're on the road. Great day to be a Bomber. Let's get out of here." So he told me that. And he said, and I said, "Great day to be a Mountaineer," when he told me that. And it just kind of planted at that point. And I guess the first time I used it was the Louisville triple overtime football game when West Virginia came back, when Rich was here, and I added, and I didn't have it planned at all. It just it came out. Great day to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be. And it kind of took. And then later that year in basketball, when West Virginia beat Chris Paul and Wake in the NCAA to go to the Sweet 16, I used it again. And so I've used it since then. And I use it not all the time when I think it's of significance. That's if West Virginia wins a game it's not supposed to, wins a game that comes way back to win, just has to feel special, but I don't use it all the time. That's how it came about.
All right, this was one that a lot of kids wrote down. You've been with all kinds of legendary coaches at WVU and interviewed them. How are they different? Were there some that you mesh with better, or kind of how are the different personalities of the football and basketball coaches that you've been associated with?
Yeah, I think like anyone, right? You get 6, 7, 8 different people together, they're going to have some similarities and some differences. I think that the commonality among all of those folks that I've worked with is that they have that obsessive desire to win. That's first and foremost, right? They live it. And if you don't live it and you don't have that obsessive quality to win, it's probably time to get out. So that's the common factor. Personality wise, I've had Don Nealon, who represented the old school coach, who was taught the game the old style way of absolute brute physicality and banging and banging and banging. And they would have 2-a-days with full contact throughout the entire month of August. And that's what he learned. That's how he coached it, to the legendary days of Bo Schembechler, who he coached with before coming to West Virginia at Michigan. And then those guys were all, in this group with Woody Hayes and all those guys. So Don was the last of the old school guys. Rich was still extremely physical, but he had a little bit more alertness, awareness as to how to play the media game. Bill Stewart was was fantastic in regard to just being an absolute gentleman, nice, great guy, great personality, truly loved the state of West Virginia. Got a raw deal. He won 9 games, 3 consecutive years. And the problem with that is Rich had won 11 games, 3 straight years before him. And all of a sudden 9 wasn't good enough. But if you look at it right now, you die to get 9 straight wins 3 years in a row. But that's just the deal on it. And Dana Dana was a different dude, man. I got along with him well, but I mean, he represented a whole different style and thought process of coaching. If you see Mike Leach, I mean, he was just the apple off the tree, very much of a Mike Leach thinker kind of a guy. Great offensive mind. And now Neil Brown, I think, represents that next that next generation of what coaches are going to be like if they're successful. And I think you get a lot of Dabo Sweeney, Neil Brown, and that is someone that understands the totality of the experience of coming to school, playing, and he's a great strategist. He's got a great mind, and this thing's going to go up really soon. But he also really has a genuine care for what these guys are doing after they get done playing. The fifth quarter program that he has tries to get everyone ready so when their days are done playing, they go out. So really different personality groups, and I've been really fortunate to get along with everyone. Basketball wise, I've gone from Gail Catlett, John Beeline, and Hugs. And Coach Catlett, similar to Don Nealon, old school values, and that was an era, and he was extremely successful, winningest coach all time at WVU. Then you had John Beeline, who introduced an entirely different style of play that, kind of you look at now and everyone's going 4 out and 1 in, and he's very much fundamentals. And I thought he was absolutely perfect. You guys won't remember this, but he took over the team. They were 8-20, and he took the team and they just did this, and this, went to the Elite Eight, was that close to going to the Final Four. And then the next year, lost on basically a mid-court shot that again would have put them into the Elite Eight again. So he was fantastic. And now Hugs is Hugs, totally different dude, on the verge here of winning 900 games. He'll become just the 6th coach ever in Division I history to win 900 games. He's won over 300 at West Virginia, won over 300 at Cincinnati. So he's a Hall of Fame guy, and he's extremely easy to work with. Even though on the sidelines, some people I think get a misperception of what he's like, but he's only like that on the sideline. He's totally chill. When you're working with him, traveling with him, doing his shows in the office, he's chill. But when he gets cranked up, obviously, he's extremely emotional, and it's been a pretty amazing ride.
All right, I've got an NBA fan. I know you're on college, but he wants to ask you an NBA question. What do you think of the Ball brothers? Have you paid attention at all to LaMelo Ball's rookie season here?
Pretty wild, huh? So, yeah, I mean, I don't follow it closely, but I catch it, and I look at it. I'm delighted that the dad is out of the picture. I thought that the dad really put unbelievable undue pressure on the kids, and I'm quite surprised as to what he is doing down there in North Carolina. And you're starting to see the improvement as well with that group down in New Orleans. And so both those guys are playing extremely well. So short answer is I'm happy, surprised, and glad the dad's not around that much.
All right. About this basketball team, one of the students wants to know, who do you think is the most underrated player on this year's basketball team?
Probably, okay, everyone fill in the blank. It's underrated, probably Gabe. I don't think we've ever had a player who shoots the ball so limited and yet has as big of an impact as he does. On our Final Four team, I think that, well, you go back, Cam Thurman, who was a recruit of John Beeline's, who Hugs inherited. Cam was similar. Cam had some injuries coming in to college and never became the offensive player that he had been in high school. But he did all the grinded out work, and I think it would be Gabe. Gabe leads the team in deflections this season. He leads in charges taken. He rebounds and he passes pretty doggone well for a big guy out there. So it would be Gabe. I don't think there's any question about that.
All right, I have a couple broadcasting questions that some students wrote down. Um, Obviously, you announce for WVU. When you watch on ESPN or Fox, they try to be impartial somewhat. Do you feel any sense of trying to be impartial, or if you would disagree with a ref, are you going to let the audience know that you disagree?
Yeah, so I think when you're doing the home team broadcast, that there's a line here. I don't think you can be an absolute jackbag homer and think that your team either never commits a foul or never plays poorly, because the reality is that they do. I think what the listener of a home broadcast wants to hear, for example, what Mountaineer fans want to hear, they want to hear the truth. And that's kind of what I try to do. So if it's a bad call, I'll say that's a bad call. If West Virginia takes advantage and gets, let's say the ball goes out of bounds against Baylor today and they give it to, or West Virginia touches the ball out of bounds today and they give it back to West Virginia, I'll say they made the wrong call. That ball should belong to Baylor. I think people just want truth. They want energy and they want excitement as their team does well, which I enjoy doing that. But I think if you're just such a blatant homer, I don't like that. And I think some people do. I think some people just want to live their lives, think that everything is rosy. But I think the majority of people just want it straight down the road. If they're playing great, say they're playing great. If they're playing poorly, playing poorly. I think that's kind of the West Virginia thing, right? So West Virginia people are known for their honesty and their direct conversation. They normally don't shroud any facts. So I think you just give it to them and they can deal with it.
All right, another broadcasting question. I have several students who are in broadcasting classes. Have you ever made a mistake on air that sticks out, and how do you handle that whenever you do make a mistake on air?
My gosh, I can't even tell you how many mistakes I've made on air. So yeah, you're going to make mistakes. I think the thing that you have to do is, if you're into this business, you can't let a mistake, it's kind of like sports. You can't let one bad play ruin you for the rest of the day. If you're a shooter and you go out there and miss your first 3 shots, you can't all of a sudden say, I'm not shooting the ball again. So I think you just have to deal with it. If I make a mistake and I'm aware of the mistake and I'm alerted to the mistake, you correct it as best that you can. You just say, hey, I misspoke earlier. I gave a wrong number earlier. I misidentified a player. Actually, it was this or that. And I think you just do that. You just deal with it like anything else in life. What's the absolute best way to fix issues in life? Tell the frickin' truth. So you just eat it, take it, and move on and try not to do it again.
All right, another NBA question. Who do you think is going to win the MVP in the NBA, and who do you think might win the championship?
Well, the Nets are starting to get real intriguing now, aren't they? I'll say this. At this moment, I don't see the Lakers doing it. I don't see the Lakers doing it. And the groundswell now is starting to move toward the Nets. So probably along that way, I would think. MVP, no idea. I haven't spent a ton of time trying to figure that one out. I'll let Stephen A talk about that incessantly, 7 hours a day.
All right. This was one that a lot of people had. Do you have a favorite player that you would interview, or a favorite WVU football or basketball player that you just loved watching kind of more than any other?
Oh yeah, I mean, but not just one. I mean, it kind of like, like which of your kids do you like the most? There's been some unbelievable guys, and girls for that matter. I had the opportunity when I first got here to do WV women's basketball. So I knew Georgianne Wells, who was the first women's player to ever dunk in a game. She's 6'7", was 6'7", is 6'7". So she was always delightful. Major Harris was unbelievable. Pat White, Stevie Slayton, Owen Schmidt, all those guys, go back. We had a running back by the name of Undra Johnson, who came from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Pretty amazing stat on Undra was that he never started a game at West Virginia, running back, finished his career as the third all-time leading rusher and never started a game. So Undra is just a great example. He's from Fort Lauderdale, came here, had a very limited pro career, but took the dollars that he made when he was released by Jimmy Johnson and the Dallas Cowboys and started a financial services career. And now he absolutely kicks it. Was in West Virginia and Clarksburg, Bridgeport for years, and now is up in the Pittsburgh area. So, I mean, I've got, basketball wise, my gosh, all those guys, Gansey and just on and on. Nate Adrian, most recently. I get along with all these guys. Tyrone Sally, just wonderful things. That to me is the greatest thing, is being able to see these people come in as young men, young women, and then they leave as adults. And then down the road, right, you see them grow up and you see what they do. For example, 1998, West Virginia is a 10 seed, and they go to Boise, Idaho in the NCAA tournament. They play the 2 seed. The 2 seed is Cincinnati. Cincinnati's coach is Bob Huggins. And West Virginia beats Cincinnati on a 3-point shot that gets banked in pretty much with less than a second to go. West Virginia beats Bob Huggins. And the guy that shot the ball was Jared West. Well, Jared West's son now is a really good player at Marshall University. And I've stayed in contact with Jared, who's the coach at Clarksburg, Notre Dame, for years. So to see those kinds of things evolve and those kinds of stories and how that all happens, that to me is the most, enjoyable thing of the whole thing.
All right, this is going way back. This is a PHS graduate who played at WVU on one of our teams. He wanted to know if you remember the name Rick Phillips. He was an offensive lineman.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Rick Phillips was a fantastic player. Rick was a starting tackle for the Mountaineers on the regular season undefeated 1988 team that played for the national championship. And that particular group that had Rick as the starting tackle, all 5 of the starting offensive linemen were 5th-year seniors, and they were absolutely fantastic. You had Kevin Koken was the center, Bob Kovach, all of those guys. John Stroya was a starting right side guard. Just they mowed people. They didn't block people. They absolutely mowed people. And Ricky was a great, great player for WVU.
With that, asking about another person you told me the other day about knowing Mr. Hamrick real well. So I spoke to him. He wanted me to make sure to tell you hello. You're the best in the business. So,
well, he's a great guy. Jim is a fantastic guy. Had great success there at Spencer High School. Won a state championship. Then obviously became the athletic director at Parkersburg. He is a delight.
all right, this is an interesting one. This may be difficult for you, but if you made a Mount Rushmore of WVU athletes, who would be on your Mount Rushmore of Mountaineers?
Whew. All time? All time.
Yeah, all time. Yeah, all time Mountaineers.
Well, so we only get 4. So obviously Jerry West, you got to put Jerry West on there. In football, I mean, Sam Huff is a college football Hall of Famer and an NFL Hall of Famer. You have to put Sam Huff on. That's why you almost have to do this stuff in eras. Hot Rod Hundley. Hot Rod, unbelievable player, first pick in the NBA draft. He's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. If you really want to get deep into it, man, and again, you guys, like, this is ancient for me too, but you know, when you look at the accomplishments of Ira Rat Rogers in football, I mean, unbelievable. Just look up that name. So it's like, that's a question, Sam, that like has no answer. I think you have to like super quantify it, but I think Jerry, Sam, Hot Rod, Rat Rogers, I mean, that's already four. I would love to, you could sit there and pull pieces back and forth and make arguments all the way through. Bottom line is, there's just been unbelievable people that have come through the years that have made great, great accomplishments. And really a lot of them, you know, back in that Jerry West era, they were West Virginia natives, right? Hunley was from Charleston. Jerry was from, you know, Eastern Kanawha County. Rod Thorne, who was an All-American, was from, you know, Princeton, Mercer County. And then you can go to Fritz Williams in the Northern Panhandle. All of those guys, one after the other, after the Hunley, West, Thorne, Williams, all four in a row, one after the other, all became All-Americans. Think about that. So that's a pretty amazing accomplishment. Then in football, I mean, you got the Pat White, the only guy that has ever started and won 4 bowl games in a row, including 2 with major bowls. So unanswerable question.
Yeah, I knew that would be a tough one. This is really changing gears, and this is from one of my friends. My students are probably surprised to know I have friends, but they wanted me to ask. I didn't know this, but you're a big time cook. What would be your go-to meal that you enjoy cooking?
Oh, food question. I like that. So, I've really been in the last year, more in the last year, couple years, really working on artisan breads and artisan breads, pizza. I just like to do a lot of different stuff. Sauce, a lot of heavy Italian stuff. Like, I love food, but I'm kind of like, I wouldn't consider myself a cosmopolitan food eater because there's a lot of stuff that various types of stuff I stay away from. So heavy Italian kind of traditional stuff.
Who do you think will win the Big 12 championship, and who do you think will win the NCAA championship?
So, Gavin, I'm going to give you the ultimate political answer. There's no way I can ever root against West Virginia unless they were eliminated. So, as a result, West Virginia in both categories. Now, if that happens, I'll sound like a prophet.
All right, this is from the same person who asked about the underrated Mountaineer basketball player. Who do you think is the best player on the team, or the most important player on the basketball team this year?
Deuce. It'd be Deuce. And I say that because if you just take a look at his plus minus on the floor, West Virginia is not where it is right now without Deuce. Now, Derek is right there. However, you know, for example, the other day, Derek got limited minutes and West Virginia is able to pound Kansas State. So I just think we're a better team when Deuce is on the floor. The numbers show that. And obviously Derek is absolutely invaluable. But if you're making me say one, I would say long term it would be Deuce.
All right, this kind of goes with earlier, but how much better do you think our offense has gotten since Oscar decided to transfer to Kentucky?
This is not to bang Oscar, but I mean, statistically, the last I knew, it was up like 5 or 6 points from when he departed to where it is right now. And again, that's not a criticism of him. It's just that West Virginia's hand was forced to play more of a perimeter game. And so you're taking more 3-point shots, you're going to score more. And that's what's happened. So yeah, certainly better offensively than they had been prior to that. And again, I think that goes back to the fact that I just don't think you ever had the marriage of how to coexist with the two bigs at the same time.
All right, I'm going to change gears a little bit because it's been a lot of basketball. Obviously, we want to win a national championship and a Big 12 championship, but what would you consider a successful season next year for the WVU football team?
So there's 10 teams in the league. I think you want to finish in the upper half. So I think you want to be, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, somewhere in there. I think that would be a really good year for year 3. That would put you into a bowl game. I think there was significant improvement, both visually and statistically, from year 1 to year 2. And I think that this coming season, that would probably be a realistic goal. Not that it's going to be easy, but that would be your goal, is to get that, somewhere in the upper half of the 10 teams to finish in there and again, go bowling.
All right, we're going to finish up with this if this works, because they have to get back to class, and we appreciate and we know you've got a Baylor game to get to. But if you were to give life advice, a lot of these guys are juniors, seniors in high school, and they're going off to college or the workforce. You kind of said this throughout, but what would be some life advice you would give to these guys and gals?
Well, I go back to what I started with when we first started this a little bit more than an hour ago. And that is, if I were you, I would use the fact that you've just gone through the pandemic and use that forever. And I think you need to tell yourself that if you were able to deal with all of this, both in school and out of school, and how it's impacted you, that's going to probably be the toughest obstacle that you're going to have to deal with. I think a couple of things. It's easy to say, find your passion and do it. Yeah, kind of, sort of, yes. But don't forget that in order to find your passion, you're going to have to stick your toe into a bunch of different pools to find out. The point is that there's no bad experience. There's only experiences that you're going to learn from. So if you think you may be interested in something and you dabble in that and you look at it and you go, oh, that's not exactly what I thought it was, that's not bad. Don't get bummed out by that. Just go like, okay, I learned more about myself. That's not for me. Okay, that's one thing. Continue to kind of nibble and nibble until you get that thing that you can find to do, that when you're actually doing it, time stops. And all of a sudden you're so into what you're doing, like you do not even realize that an hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours has gone by because you're there. If you have that moment, if you can find something like that, just feast on that. That is your area. Okay. That's one thing. I think that truth is essential. In other words, there are going to be times where you're going to have to tell the truth, and it might hurt a little bit in the beginning. Tell the truth. The truth is the ultimate vaccine that will keep you away from a lot of hardship if you start telling not the truth. If you start telling not the truth, then that just kind of builds itself, and you never get out of it. Be honest. Be honest with everyone that you deal with, whether it hurts or not in the beginning. That will help you move forward. Also this, nothing good in life is easy. Nothing good in life is easy. If it's easy, I would put money down that it eventually is not good for you. But if you can get through something and get through some struggles and find your way through it, when you come out on the other side, you'll realize, yeah, I've never encountered anything in my life that was easy to do that was really, truly good. But when you do hard things and you work through it and you don't run away, which I think this society has a lot of running away that we do, because if it gets bad, it's hard, we'll just move on. Can't be soft. Soft people are soft. And they ultimately they just go by the wayside. But the people that just keep pushing oftentimes have the most success. That's kind of it. I mean, nothing good comes easy. People that work hard, as simple as it sounds, oftentimes are the people that have the most enjoyment and the most success. Honesty and truth is absolutely essential in everything that you do. Don't be scared about failing. Don't think, I've got a nephew a little bit older than you guys in college now. For some reason, he thinks that when you come out of high school or when you pick your first major in school, that's ultimately going to be what you do for your life. I guarantee you, probably not. Like 90%, probably not. You're going to go into different things. You're going to see different things. You're going to experience things you don't even know exist right now. That ultimately will be. So don't think every decision's a life decision, but if you do have an idea that I want to end up doing this, then you have to start walking down that road. In my case, it was play-by-play. Well, I probably should not have gotten a job as a chef if I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer. I probably should have taken that news job, which was still broadcasting, because eventually I'm on the same right road. So like, I have kids at WVU who come to me and they say, I'm a senior, I want to be a play-by-play announcer. I say, how much play-by-play have you done so far? Well, I haven't done any. Well, guess what? You got a hell of a problem, because the clock never stops. And that, perhaps, Sam, will be my last line, is this: time never stops. Your elementary school years went by quick, didn't they? And then middle school went by quick, and your high school's going quick, and your freshman year went by fast, but your sophomore went faster, and your junior went faster, and maybe your senior year seems like it's going by faster. Well, guess what? That never stops. The same thing holds true in college. Freshman, sophomore, junior, you only have 3 summers, and then you're done. It's time to work. If you're not taking advantage and getting internships and getting things involved right off the bat, your clock is on. The moment you step on campus in a college, clock's on. If you don't take advantage and get a ton of other experience besides the classroom, because that's not where it's at, it's the other things that you do, then you're wasting your time. And someone else who wants to do exactly what it is that you want to do, they're doing the other things. And when it comes time to get a job and they say, I've done all this, all these other things that I've done, and what have you done? Well, I went to school and got my degree. Guess who doesn't get the job? This person. And the person that's got all these tools that they've done, that's the more hireable person. They've got more value that they can bring. So gain value, bring value to the workplace, bring value to your school, and don't forget, this is going to go by really super quick.
Well, we can't thank you enough for doing this, and we'll be listening tonight to the Baylor game, and then through the Big 12 and NCAA tournament and football. And so thank you, and hopefully, me personally, I'll be back in touch, that maybe you can talk to my new group of kids next year.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Everyone, thanks so very much for being with me. And Sam, thanks for the invitation. You guys stay well, stay safe.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.